The moon shines bright, and the stars give a light. In a little while it will be day. The voice of love, it calls upon us all, and bids us awake and pray. Arise, arise, awake thee, arise, for life she is calling thee. For it might be the mothering of your sweet soul, if you open your eyes and see that the life of a man, it comes with little plan. It flourishes like a flower, as tender in the heart into which you're born. So cherish your every hour, for our time is not long. Time's an old folks' song, no longer can we stay. Those that remember say, blessed are you all who make it through this brawl. Long life and another good year. Blessed are you all who answer to the call. Long life and another good year. For the moon shines bright, and the stars will be our height. Life she is calling thee. Arise, arise, away thee, arise, and evermore watch for me.
Hello, good morning and welcome to Stonehenge for live coverage of the sunrise on this, the summer solstice. That's right, today is the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. It's also the day at which the sun is at its highest point in the sky, and it all starts right here. My name's Ben Shires and I'm delighted to be joining you on this very special occasion. And just before we go any further, can I say, by the way, what a fantastic way that was to kick off the show. That was a song by the very talented Sam Lee called The Moon Shines Bright. And you probably enjoyed it as much as I did. Very, very peaceful, very great way to celebrate this brilliant day. And it was full of photographs of Stonehenge throughout the ages, and they are very special to us because those photos form part of the exhibition Your Stonehenge, which is currently available to see at the Stonehenge Visitor Centre, which is where we're broadcasting from right now. You might be wondering, where are the stones? Well, they're about a mile that way. We can't see them in direct sight, but I do have the shot of them behind me right now. That's the live feed. That's being taken by our intrepid and very hardy video operator, Charlie. She was out there last night filming the sunset. She's there this morning, braving the elements for the sunrise as well. Now we're going to be with you for the next 90 minutes or so. We'll have all sorts to look forward to, including, of course, sunrise itself. And I just want to tee up something particularly special. Now, I mentioned about photography there, and someone who has got an incredible link to Stonehenge through photographs that maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect to is none other than Brian May. Yeah, that one. The one from Queen. Brian May and his team of archivists sat down with us earlier to talk about that connection, and we'll be bringing you that exclusive interview a little bit later on. We are here for the next hour and a half. We've got all sorts to look forward to. One thing that I should point out is that whilst we're going to be here bringing you lots of different Stonehenge content and cutting across to the live feed at various points, you might think, I actually just want to watch Stonehenge without any interruption. Perhaps you're getting a little bit of tank top envy. That's completely fine. It's completely normal. Whichever way you want to watch it is up to you. You do have the option to just watch the sunrise as it comes up over the stones on our dedicated YouTube and Facebook channels. But hopefully plenty of you will want to stick around and join us for all the fun and games that we've got coming up this morning, because there really is a lot to look forward to. I should also point out as well that Stonehenge is looked after by English Heritage, which is a charity, and it's a charity that has been overwhelmed and is so thankful for all the support that people like you and from around the world have shown it over the last difficult months of the pandemic. It's been a tough time for everyone, and English Heritage are incredibly grateful for all the support that people have shown it. And if you want to continue supporting English Heritage tonight, this morning even, it feels like tonight for me, we've been up all night, but if you want to continue this morning, then you can do so. There is the donate button on Facebook. There's also the dollar icon on YouTube where you can donate money through there, and all the money that you do support us with will go directly into the buildings and the monuments that English Heritage look after, just like Stonehenge. There's over 400 of them across England, and we are so grateful for all the money that you can pledge to support. Now, one thing I should mention is that Facebook is particularly bad for this. If you see any links under this live stream which don't come from the official English Heritage account, it's likely to be a spammer. Please don't click on it. They'll want to take your money off you, and it won't be for any conservation or heritage matters. It will be for something completely different, so please don't fall into that. Now, one thing that I've mentioned already is that people are going to be watching this. They're going to be based here in the UK. They might be in the Northern Hemisphere. They might be in the Southern Hemisphere, where, of course, it's the winter solstice today. And they're going to be, enthused by this fantastic occasion. If that is you and you want to get in touch with us, we would love to hear from you throughout this broadcast. So please say hello in the comment section. There will be a chance to ask one of our fantastic experts, Susan Greening, a question later on. But specifically right now, what I would like to know is, do you have any memories of Stonehenge and visits to Stonehenge, particularly around the solstice. If you've got a personal connection, if you've been here on winter or summer solstices past, obviously we can't have people here at the moment due to the pandemic restrictions, but we'd love to hear about your recollections and anecdotes of special memories that you hold of this very special place. So if it's something that you want to share with the world, then please let us know, and I'll be giving some of those comments a bit of airtime as we go throughout the show. Can't wait to share some of those with you as well. Right now though, we are very fortunate in that we can take a little look at the live feed from the stones. So let's head over to that live feed now. Like I say, Charlie is out in the field. You know, the Wiltshire weather at this time on a morning can be a bit changeable, but she's got her all-weather gear on. She's bringing us these pictures right now. And as you can see, Stonehenge is looking glorious. There's some various hues in the sky. There's some blues and pinks creeping in, and we're hoping, even though we had somewhat of an underwhelming sunset, that sunrise might surprise us and be a little bit stunning. So let's keep our fingers crossed for that. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes of quiet contemplation with the stones, and we'll be back very soon. Such stunning pictures live there as the sun starts to slowly make its ascent this morning, and we will be cutting back to that throughout the morning as well, so please do stick around with us if you can. I know it's an early start for many of you, but it's great to see you and hear from you wherever you are in the world. Please keep those comments and recollections about Stonehenge coming in as well. We'll be coming to some of those very soon, but right now, what is summer solstice? What is it all about? What relation does it have to Stonehenge? Well, these are all questions that I can't answer adequately, but one person who can is our fantastic historian and expert, Susan Greeny. Very fortunately, she was on hand earlier this week to give me a little bit of a guided tour and get this novice up to speed. So take a look at this. Well, I'm greeted by two very impressive sights. One is Stonehenge and the other is Susan Greeny. Hello, Susan.
Morning.
This is great. We're here at Stonehenge. It's not exactly the solstice, but we're very close to it, so it's a great time to be discussing it. And we're stood next to this huge outlying stone. Many people will be familiar with the sort of inner part of Stonehenge. What is the significance of this edifice?
So we are stood in the entrance to Stonehenge, and this heel stone is one of the biggest stones on the site. It's not been shaped and worked like the other ones. It doesn't look kind of rectangular and neat like some of the other stones at Stonehenge, and in essence it marks the solstice alignment. So when you would stand in the middle of Stonehenge on Midsummer's Day, the sun rises in this direction from the middle of the site, and it marks where the sun rises to the northeast. Originally, we think that the heel stone may have had a friend, a partner. There may have been another large stone standing here, and what would have happened is the sun actually rose between the two of them. Today, if you ever get a glimpse of a perfect sunrise, you'll notice it rises slightly to the left of the heel stone. It's not directly above it, and we think that's because it had this partner, so it's actually rising along this corridor that's marked at the entrance.
Well, that would make sense because heels normally come in pairs, don't they? So. But it's a fantastic stone, isn't it? And it's sort of very evocative today, covered in all its mosses and lichens and everything. So we know that this is the point when the sun rises on the solstice that first receives those rays. So obviously this had a great point of significance for the people who originally built Stonehenge. So they knew what they were doing, didn't they? Putting these potentially 2 stones here.
Yeah, and we know this is probably 40 tons, something like that. It's by far the largest stone on the entire site. So they're deliberately selecting this one, and for some reason they're deliberately selecting not to work it into shape. So they've left it in this kind of natural pointy shape, and perhaps that was why this particular stone was selected to make that alignment really obvious.
So shall we trace the way that the sun would fall now as we walk towards the main body of the monument?
Yeah, so we're in the main entrance, and on either side of us are the low banks which form the end of the avenue. So the avenue is like the processional approach to Stonehenge. It runs all the way down into the valley and eventually ends up at the River Avon, so it connects Stonehenge to the river. And we're approaching Stonehenge kind of through the main entrance, in effect.
I see. And to the untrained eye, it looks just like an undulating landscape, perhaps with a ditch in it. But this is all man-made. This is all very specifically designed. And when we talk about Stonehenge, what we really mean is it's a henge made of stone. There are many different types of henges, aren't there?
Yeah, so what you can see at either side of us here is the ditches of a circular monument that goes all the way around the stone circle. This is the henge. This is what a henge is. It's a circular earthwork with a bank and a ditch. It's slightly deeper on this side because it's been excavated, but on that side it's not. It's only the first bit of it has been excavated. And this, we're now into the main enclosure. So the henge is kind of all the way around the outside of the stone circle, and it's much earlier. It was built probably about 500 years before the stones got put up in the middle.
So it was made in stages, but we do know with a deal of certainty, I suppose, that its purpose in celebrating and marking the solstices must have been a central part of why it was built, in whatever form it was built.
That's right, yeah, and obviously it was important to make the view from this perspective particularly fine. So the view in front of us is quite a well preserved side of Stonehenge, but it's also where the most regular shaped stones are. It's also where the stones have been most carefully worked and shaped, bashed with hammer stones to make them nice and bright and clean. So this approach, this view of Stonehenge, was obviously very important for people in prehistory.
And one of the things that I think it's easy to forget when you look at the pictures is quite how narrow some of the gaps between the big sarsen stones are. I mean, we can squeeze through this. I'll let you go first, but on some of the others, they're really tiny gaps, aren't they?
They are small gaps. They're just, what they're doing is they're framing the axis. So they're making these sort of narrow slots along which you can look to see the sunrise, or at midwinter the sunset. So they're sort of framing along a very narrow axis in a way.
So we've now walked the kind of the sunbeam line, if you like, and we find ourselves in the inner sanctum of the circle. And the atmosphere changes immediately, doesn't it? You can imagine on a brighter day, perhaps when the sun is shining through, this whole area is lit. There is a real sort of sense of it being otherworldly, almost. Even today, when it's shrouded in mist, it has that. Something that I've often wondered is, do we know exactly what people would have been doing on the day, let's say 4,500 years ago, to mark that occasion?
Well, we know that the whole site is orientated around that solstice axis, so it must have been significant to gather here in some numbers, presumably at midsummer and presumably also at midwinter. And we don't really know what people did here. So when archaeologists have excavated here, they find the hammer stones and the antler picks used to dig the holes, but not that much evidence for what actually took place here. There isn't lots of animal bones, lots of fires, anything like that. In fact, it seems to have been kept quite clean and possibly sacred, a bit like a church. You know, it's not somewhere where you would have just rubbish. So the solstice axis is really the only clue for us as to what is happening at midsummer. And the centre of Stonehenge here is actually quite a small space, so perhaps it was only a privileged few that could come into this middle space. Perhaps it was the priests or the leaders of the community. But what they were wanting to do, and what everybody still wants to do nowadays when they come to Solstice, is stand in exactly the right spot, because that's when you get that alignment. So standing here, we can look out and see the heel stone that we've just been standing near.
Yeah.
And what happens on Midsummer's morning is that the sun rises just to the left of that heel stone. It has moved, the sun has moved by about 1 solar diameter since Stonehenge was built, so it would have been even further left 4,500 years ago. The sun rises there, you get beautiful shadows usually. If the sun's clear, you get really dramatic effects. And then the axis of the site is in this direction also, where the sides of the tallest trilithon, which is now partly fallen down, would have created a slot in the middle of that arrangement. And that's the slot down which the midwinter sun would set. So the whole monument is arranged on this line. That's really significant. And so we can only assume that whatever ceremonies and rituals and activities took place here, that they were, part of it was witnessing that movement of the sun. Perhaps it was making sure that the sun came back. Perhaps it was making sure that the world continued to turn and the days changed. Perhaps they felt like they had to conduct ceremonies and rituals to ensure that that happened. Or perhaps it's just that that was a very auspicious occasion for other things to happen. You can imagine inauguration ceremonies or particular kind of life events that might have taken place. But really it's kind of guesswork as to exactly what they're doing in the middle.
I think it puts a really different spin on my imagining of what might have been the situation all those years ago, because in my head, you know, they've got the ancient version of party poppers, streamers and balloons, and they're having a great time here celebrating, you know, very much as we do in modern times. But actually, if in your mind the way that you process this event is, if I don't come here and pay homage to whatever the belief system is, the sun might not rise again, or the world might stop turning, or everything that I know and hold dear goes away. That goes from party to, oh, this is a heavy obligation. So yeah. It's a really, obviously we can never know, but I think, you know, just being in the centre of the circle, I think it gives a really different spin on what you might think. It has a reverence of its own, doesn't it? Which then can make you feel that maybe it was a more solemn place.
Potentially, yeah. And this is a small space, and that's one of the things about Stonehenge is it's an incredibly sophisticated monument that took many hundreds of hours to build. Hundreds of people would have had to be involved in transporting the stones and putting them upright, and yet the middle of the monument is small. It's not a place where hundreds of people can gather, so not everybody who took part in building Stonehenge could have come and stood here and witnessed what was going on. So that suggests it's kind of maybe some exclusive elite or leaders or priests or particular people who were allowed into this space, and perhaps they kind of witnessed the sunrise and the sunset on behalf of the community and would report back that the sun had definitely risen, everything was going to be right again, or actually the clouds obscured it and it means it's a bad omen for this year, or whatever it was, how they interpreted the movements of the sun.
Oh, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I'm delighted to say that not only have we got part 2 of that very special Summer Solstice Stonehenge tour coming up soon, but Susan Greeny, who you saw in the film there, will be joining us a little bit later on. She'll be answering some of my questions. She might even answer some of yours as well. So if you want to drop any questions that you might have about Stonehenge or the solstice in the comments, then do so, and we could be answering yours. And speaking of getting in touch, you've been doing that already in your droves. It might be early for many of you out there, but that hasn't put you off at all. So thank you so much. You've already given us a comment or a recollection of Stonehenge. That's what I've been specifically looking for this morning. Let's take a look at a few of those now. These are just a few shout outs. Firstly from Amy Jones, hello from Chicago. Kiar Leach, hello from Montana in USA. Mark Chamberlain is watching in Bedford, England. And Kevin Hill, way over in New Zealand, wishing everyone a happy solstice. We've also got Shay Rossi. It's her birthday today. today. Happy birthday, Shay. And we've got another birthday, Sharon Imber. A happy and very special solstice birthday to all of you. And here are some of the recollections that we've got from people of Stonehenge and Solstice over the years. Abby says, I've been lucky enough to attend Solstice for the past few years and have been lucky enough to have witnessed many beautiful sunrises, enjoying watching this morning. Well, fingers crossed that we see a beautiful sunrise this morning as well, Abby. CW says, visited Stonehenge on my honeymoon in fall 1997. I'm guessing you might be in North America if you call it fall, so that's probably a long journey and a memorable honeymoon. Hope you enjoyed that and that you're enjoying this morning. We've got Sahini Guptu, who says, hello from India / Kolkata. Been to Stonehenge in 2018 in the summer. It was simply awesome. Well, let me tell you, Stonehenge is awesome any time of the year. Obviously, we aren't able to welcome people in at the moment, but whenever you do get the chance to visit, it is a beautiful, magical and mystical place. And we'll take just a couple more for now. Marion from Torbay says, good morning. I had some fabulous times at the summer solstice. Wish I was there now. Well, the feelings mutual, Marion. We can't wait to welcome you back for a future solstice. And Dan has said that she grew up having picnics around stones in the early 70s, which when I was speaking to my dad about coming down here for this, he said, oh, we want a school trip to the stones in the sort of 70s as well. We climbed all over them. Well, you can't do that now. Finding out exactly why from Susan Green, who'll be joining us in the studio very shortly. But speaking of Susan, we're going to go to her now for the second look at her summer solstice tour right after this short break.
English Heritage cares for our most historic places, including Castle, Stonehenge, Hadrian's Wall, Dover Castle. Become an English Heritage member and enjoy memorable days out from just £4.75 per month. An annual membership gives you unlimited access to hundreds of historic places. Join today. Search English Heritage Membership online. English Heritage, where history never stands still.
Is there any reason why it was this particular spot? Obviously, the landscape around this area is littered with incredible Stone Age places of worship and significance. But I mean, aside from it being quite near the visitor place, which I've got a feeling was built slightly after Stonehenge.
Slightly later, yeah, slightly later.
But still, is there any reason why this spot on this part of the Wiltshire landscape had that level of significance for those people?
Yeah, so as you say, there are already earlier monuments here, being built here, so there are ritual monuments in this land time before Stonehenge. And we think that maybe they were built in this part of the chalk downland because it was free of trees, because it was an where you could observe the sky, where you could gather in large numbers, your animals and come together as a community. So that's maybe why they started to build monuments here. Why Stonehenge is built on this particular spot is a bit more difficult to guess. But one of the clues is that down near the Heelstone and where the avenue is, there are some geological stripes in the ground, which sounds a bit odd, but they're features that are created through glacial action, so freeze-thaw effects, right back in the Ice Age. And they create these stripes and ridges, which might have been visible to prehistoric people because the ridges were still there and the stripes may have had different vegetation. And by chance, those stripes just here line up with the solstice. So if prehistoric people noticed these funny stripes in the ground and noticed that they lined up with solstice, that might have been enough for them to think this is a special place. This is where we need to build our temple and kind of build on what's already here as a kind of sacred place. So it's just one idea as to why this particular monument was built in this spot.
And we've talked a lot about the sunrise. Obviously, sunset is a magical experience as well, and it moves in a different way. What do we know about that side of things, and where are we looking for in terms of how it affects particularly the midsummer sunset?
So at midwinter, the shortest day, the sun sets in completely opposite direction summer sunrise, so 180 degrees. Quite and there was that happens over a large part of the British Isles. That's not why it's built here. But at midwinter, we know that the sun would set between the two tallest stones of the trilithon at the head of the horseshoe and descend down into the altar stone. And archaeologists are kind of like debated for a while, is it midwinter that's more important or is it midwinter that's more important? And the way that perhaps we come in through the entrance, as we've just done, has walked up into the site, the main event is ahead of you. So maybe that suggests that the midwinter was more important than the midsummer. We also have some evidence from the settlement near here at Durrington Walls, where people were living at the time that they were using Stonehenge, where there's a lot of evidence for feasting going on at midwinter, lots of evidence for partying. That's where the party happened. Lots of pottery, lots of animal bones, and a lot of the pigs are being killed around about 9 months old, which means that they're killing them in the winter. So that suggests that maybe the midwinter solstice was more important. I quite like to think that both were marked, was significant, because they seem to have made this alignment and placed the heelstone, etc., to mark both of them. But maybe midwinter was slightly more important.
See, it's really interesting because I guess the thing for a 21st century person is midsummer usually guarantees better weather, and so it's an easier one for us to celebrate at least. But if we're not worried about the world ending and maybe a good harvest for the following year, etc., maybe that explains why the midwinter solstice had more significance for Stone Age peoples. Let's talk about this obsession, I suppose, with the summer solstice particularly, and the way that people like to observe it and celebrate it, because I think there's a misconception about how long that has stretched back into prehistory, isn't there?
Yeah, a lot of people will say, and you'll see it with some of the solstice kind of coverage in the news, people have always celebrated solstice at Stonehenge. And that's not true. Unfortunately, we know that people in prehistory were probably here celebrating. That's why they built Stonehenge. But it's actually not really until, the first person to identify in modern times that the solstice alignment existed was William Stukely, an antiquary in the 17th century, early 18th century. Really, it's not until the Victorian period, probably about 1870, that people start to come to Stonehenge at midsummer solstice and try and see the sunrise. And that's noted in a couple of letters. People say that they attended a talk by a local antiquary, John Thurnham, in Amesbury, and they decided to come. He talked a lot about the solstice alignment, and they decided to come up the next week and see if they could spot it. And we know that people, in gradually increasing numbers of people, were coming to have a look at it, and it became a thing that people, would take cycle trips to witness and that kind of thing. And gradually, over the 20th century, it's become more and more of an occasion. The first Druid ceremonies took place here in 1905, for example, when it was kind of, there were friendly societies rather than religious groups. But yeah, so numbers have gradually increased, but that's very much a sort of 20th century phenomena rather than something that stretches all the way back to prehistory.
Now I can see that the sun is trying to poke through. It's trying to show us how the shadows are cast on a morning and all the rest of it. You can imagine, I suppose, how magical it feels, and I know that this is something that you've experienced before, and you've had a long association with Stonehenge. On the morning of the summer solstice, particularly when there are a lot of people here and we're not sort of affected by issues that we have been so over the last couple of years, what is that like? Do you feel something otherworldly, something which transcends normality?
There's a big difference between being a day like today, when we're pretty much on our own within the stone circle, and being here with hundreds and hundreds of other people. And you know that those people have come to the site because they regard it as so special and so significant, and they want to witness the sunrise from this place. And you get a whole range of people coming, families, individuals, students, some with amazing beliefs, some with no beliefs at all. Some people are just here to witness a spectacle. Some people, it's a real, religious and important experience. So to have that kind of mix of people in one place, with all thinking that Stonehenge is such a significant place that they want to come and celebrate at it in the modern day, it makes for a really special experience. And I think it's one of those occasions where you see how much Stonehenge means to people, and how much people still feel a connection with the site and still want to come here and celebrate solstice.
And I think that just speaks testament to what an amazing place it is. It's a World Heritage Site for a reason. It's managed over its 4,500 year history thus far to inspire people, to move them, to draw them to the site, and it will continue to do that. And I think it's a real honour to be able to celebrate in whatever take on it you have on Stonehenge, just to accept and appreciate that it's here and it's part of us all. It's a beautiful place, isn't it?
It is.
Wow, what a fantastic treat that was to have Susan Greeny give us that insight into Stonehenge and how the solstice all works. We're going to be joined by Susan very shortly. Before I come to some of your comments, I just want to apologise if you're trying to get the live feed of the stones at the moment. We are having some technical issues which I believe are weather related, so I can only apologise for that. Obviously, we're working very, very hard to try and re-establish that connection. As soon as we do, we'll let you know on the comments section of the page that you're looking at, and hopefully we'll get that up in time for sunrise. I'll keep you updated on that. But in the meantime, let's take a look at some of the comments from people who are tuning in from across the world. Don Mills has said, we visited Stonehenge at summer solstice in 2018 after a cruise of the British Isles. Unforgettable bucket list experience. Absolutely, I'll never forget my first time here, and every time coming back is equally as special. And Addy has said, it's Addy from New York here, this is outstanding. I have my sister watching and I hope other friends on Facebook. Thank you for this. Well, thank you, Addy, for tuning in and getting in touch, and thank you to everyone who is watching as well. Just to bring you up to speed, if you've only recently joined us, we're providing coverage throughout the morning of summer solstice here at Stonehenge. We are unfortunately having some technical issues with our live feed from the stones at the moment, but we do still have a packed show coming to you from the Stonehenge Visitor Centre, which is where I'm currently stood, and I'm very fortunate to have a special guest with us this morning as well. You've seen her on some of those films giving us a guided tour of the stones. It's the one and only Susan Greeny. Hello, Susan, come on in.
Good morning.
And morning to you, and thank you so much for getting up so early. Because it is always an early one on the summer solstice, isn't it? So you must have some great tips for waking up at this kind of time, because you've done plenty of these over the years.
I have, and actually most years I've stayed up all night. So this is unusual in that I did get a little bit of kip this time.
Oh wow, well that's a seasoned pro speaking there. Yeah, I think I managed a couple of hours, and it's almost worse than having no sleep at all, isn't it?
Yeah.
But thank you so much for giving us that tour. I think for a lot of people, myself included, so much of that was new information or things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought about. I think one of the things that is so striking for us in the 21st century is how seemingly advanced, how full of wisdom and knowledge our far ancient ancestors were. I mean, these truly were remarkable people, weren't they?
They were. I mean, building Stonehenge was a ridiculous engineering feat in itself, but to align it so precisely with the movements of the sun must have taken a huge amount of effort, not just marking out and designing the monument, but actually moving those enormously heavy stones and positioning them so accurately that they framed the sunrise and the sunset on those particular times of year. It's, yeah, a real marvel.
Absolutely, and it's still such a special thing to be able to stand within those stones when people are allowed to. Again, obviously we haven't been able to do that these last couple of years, but I think there is a magic to it. There's something that you can't quite put your finger on. I'm sure that the Neolithic people would have felt that in just the same way that people do today.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the weather this year hasn't been great, and the weather last year wasn't great. So I'm kind of hoping that when the public are allowed back, maybe the sun will come back. Yeah, maybe it's an omen.
We haven't necessarily missed vintage solstice occasions, have we? But for people who were, celebrating a Neolithic solstice, would a downturn in the weather have been a bad omen, or would that just have been accepted and moved on from?
It's really interesting to think about what the people in the Neolithic period would have thought. I mean, solstice itself happens over a few days, so if they managed to see the sun at some point over those 3 or 4 days, they may have seen that as a good omen for the year to come, that the gods were pleased with them. But of course we just don't know what they believed, and perhaps it was the case that a really foggy or really rainy solstice was quite bad and generally was looked upon as not a great occasion. But getting into the mindset of Neolithic people and what they actually believed about the sun, any gods, any religious beliefs they had, it's so difficult for us to understand that it's quite tricky to know what that meant. But for us, it's obviously nice to see the sunrise and see that alignment in full, and I suspect it was the same for them.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's probably part of the human condition that everyone enjoys a lovely sunrise. I mean, no one necessarily wants to see a fog ridden atmosphere, do they, when they wake up? So perhaps they felt the same as us. Now, we do have a few questions from the people watching at home, Susan. This is the first time that either of us have seen those, so apologies if I'm throwing you any curveballs here. Claire from London has asked, why is Stonehenge so protected? Do people damage the monument?
So Stonehenge is part of a World Heritage Site, so it's one of the most significant places in the world. So our job at English Heritage is to protect that site as well as make it available for people to visit. So we've got a balancing act, and we know that when the Stone Circle was open to the public up until the end of the 1970s, yes, people did damage the stones by intentionally knocking bits off them, but also by having picnics and therefore rats and rabbits burrowing under the stones. All kinds of damage was done, graffiti, for example. So we've got a real kind of ethos to try and protect Stonehenge, and that's why we restrict the numbers of people from going into the middle of the site. The archaeology under the ground is quite fragile. The stones themselves have really unique carvings on them and evidence of how the stones were shaped and worked. And so to protect that and to preserve it for the future, that's why we have to sadly close off the monument to the main visitors during the day. But of course we do offer Stone Circle access visits for those people who want to get up close and personal with Stonehenge before and after we open to the public.
Absolutely, and I think it just goes to show as well that we want to make sure that this site is preserved for centuries to come. It makes sense that we keep it in as good condition now as we can do. Susan, I'm just going to pause for a second there, just to let you know what the current state of play is with our live feed from stones. Now, we're a couple of minutes away from sunrise, and I'm aware that we don't currently have a live shot from the stones. I wonder, do we have any kind of footage that we can show at this stage? We don't unfortunately have anything at the moment. I'm ever so sorry. Technical gremlins at work here. I blame the Wiltshire fog perhaps. We were beset by problems last night as well. We were meant to be joining you for the sunset, and we couldn't do that. We did get a great picture of the stones. This morning we're here. The stones aren't. It seems to be one or the other at the moment, so we will persevere and hopefully we'll get back to the sunrise when we can do. And actually one quite prescient point when we're talking about the sunrise is that the sunrise at Stonehenge isn't necessarily when the sun rises, is it, Susan? Because of the way the landscape falls, the tree line, everything like that. So it's perhaps not the sunrise as our Neolithic ancestors would have known it.
Yeah, so the sun rises towards the northeast, and as we saw in that film, it's just over to the left of the heel stone, which is that outlying stone outside the stone circle. And today there are trees on the horizon in that direction, so you get the sun glimpse just a little bit later than you might have done if it was a completely clear horizon. And of course, we don't necessarily know how many trees were around in the Neolithic period when Stonehenge was built, but the evidence from pollen evidence and land snails and beetles and things like that does tell us that it's a relatively open grassland landscape. Very few trees up on the chalk downland where Stonehenge is, so it's likely that they had a clear view of the sunrise in the past.
Interesting. Well, we do have some pre-recorded shots now from a previous sunrise at Stonehenge, so we're going to cut to those now so you can at least get a sense of what it is like witnessing the sun rising over the monument. I think these were taken. The sunrise on that day wasn't at its best, but at least we can spend some time with the monument and take in a bit of the atmosphere. You gonna go live? Hello again, live from Stonehenge on this, the summer solstice. You're joining me, Ben Shires, and our historian Susan Greeny here in the visitor centre of Stonehenge. Now, if you were hoping to see a live stream from the stones, I can only apologise. We were as well. Unfortunately, technical difficulties have yet again surfaced, so we are finding it difficult at the moment to actually bring you any live pictures of the stones. We're working very hard to rectify this, so as and when that situation changes, we will of course let you know. And I know that we are a poor substitute for a sunrise over Stonehenge, Susan, but unfortunately this is the best that we can muster in this case. So instead of dwelling on that, why don't we take a look at some more questions from people who are watching at home. This comes in from Paul in Cambridge. Are there any other monuments like Stonehenge, or is it completely unique?
Oh, that's a really good question. So Stonehenge, as many people know, is kind of connected together a bit like Lego. It's got joints, mortise and tenon joints that connect the upright stones and the horizontal stones. And those are kind of woodworking techniques. So we think that at the time that Stonehenge was built, that there may well have been other timber monuments that looked very, very similar to Stonehenge. There are examples nearby at places like Woodhenge and the Southern Circle at Durrington Walls, which are only a couple of miles away from the site. And they quite possibly had lintels the same as Stonehenge. So although it looks unique to us today, it may not have looked quite as unique at the time. And of course, there are many, many other stone circles that don't have the horizontal lintels and are not worked and shaped in the same way. So it does sit within a group of much larger group of stone circles which are found all across Britain and Ireland.
One thing that has struck me as well, if you get the chance to visit the visitor centre here, there's quotes plastered across the wall from people dating back to the 1100s right up until modern day writers and thinkers, giving their thoughts and awe about Stonehenge. It's had that ability to inspire and to stand out for so long, hasn't it?
It has. It's a monument that's never been forgotten, really. So even the earliest medieval manuscripts mention Stonehenge as one of the wonders and have little drawings of it. So we know that it's been a monument that has been in people's minds and standing as a landmark in the landscape for a really long time.
Absolutely, and it still stands today. We'd love to bring you pictures of it standing with the sun rising behind it. Unfortunately, we're still struggling on that score at the moment, but we do have some more questions. Diane from Germany has asked, how many stones would there originally have been in total? Are some missing?
Yes, there's a lot missing. It's really difficult to put a figure on the number that were there at the beginning. So there's about 80 of the blue stones, which are the smaller stones that were brought from South Wales. And there are 15 really large sarsens in the middle and 30 sarsens if the stone circle was complete around the outside. So you've got well over 100 stones making up the monument originally. And yes, there are now a lot missing. And we think that most of them were probably broken up and taken away in the medieval period when people were building roads in the area and using it and breaking it up as road stone. So there's a lot of stones missing, particularly from sort of the back side of the monument, which seems to have been less carefully finished and less regular stones used.
Absolutely, and obviously what we would consider to be absolute sacrilege today was par for the course. I guess it was just seen as a building material by some people, so it kind of makes it even more remarkable that it's survived as complete as it has for so long.
Yeah, I mean, there's Avebury, which is just to the north of here. We do have really good records from the 16th, 17th century of people knocking over the stones, breaking them up, partly because they wanted the land for agriculture, but also because they wanted the building stone, and also because it was a pagan monument and they were kind of destroying it for Christian reasons. We don't have any of those records for Stonehenge. We don't have any written records as to when the stones were broken up and taken away, but they must have been taken away at some point. We have stone holes, for example, that have been found by archaeologists, but we don't have the stones that stood in them.
But it just adds to that mystery, doesn't it? And it adds to the intrigue of the site. And speaking of the site, you may have noticed if you've been closely monitoring, we do now have the live shot back. A small hooray in the studio. We've been panicking here, and massive apologies for those of you who are hoping to see more of the stone circle than you have already this morning. It is now available, so you can go. We do have exclusive live streams of that on our Facebook and YouTube sites. So if you just want to watch that, if you've had a little bit enough of me rabbiting on this morning, then you're very welcome to do that. We will be cutting across from myself over to the live stream as we go along as well. But Susan, for now, thank you so much for being such a pro, for bearing with us through all of these difficulties and, of course, giving us fantastic tours and insights into the site. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Fingers crossed for sunrise.
Absolutely, and yeah, now you can go get a little bit of rest, I suppose. So thank you very much for joining us. That was Susan Greeny there. What an absolute pleasure it was to have her with us answering some of your questions. Now, if you're just joining us, or if you've come back having wondered where the live stream of the Stones was, I can confirm, as of about 30 seconds ago, that stream is back up and running. So please do get involved in that if you would like to. We are broadcasting live for a little while longer still, and there's still loads to look forward to as well. And if you recall, I have been asking for your engagement and interaction throughout the morning. So if you want to share your memories of Stonehenge, of the Solstice with us, we'll be coming back to a few of those a little bit later on. Right now, though, I do have something quite special to lead into, and I promised at the start of the broadcast this morning, if you were watching, that we would have a little bit of exclusive content from the rock legend that is Brian May. Well, why is Brian May involved in summer solstice here at Stonehenge? Let me explain. We've got the visitor centre that we're broadcasting from here right now. If you saw the music video at the start of the show, you'll have seen loads of fantastic photographs that make up the exhibition, which is going on here at the moment. It's called Your Stonehenge, and it's full of fantastic pictures of the site dating back over 150 years. Now, those snapshots all are from different family albums that people have donated, sent in. They cover the different changes to the site that we've seen over that time, also the changes to things like fashion and what picnics people would bring to the site. They're a true social record of one place across a number of different years, and it's been very exciting to be able to collate them in one place. Now, the oldest image in that exhibition, as far as English Heritage knew, was from a Mr. Hugh Routh, and it shows his relatives enjoying a trip to the site way back in 1875. They'd come from a place called Amport for a day out, as you would do in the mid-Victorian era. And when the exhibition opened, English Heritage thought it would be quite interesting to see if we could find any image that actually predated that 1875 photograph. And you might have guessed where this is going now. Brian May, amongst many other things, he's a polymath, of course. He's into his music, he loves badgers and conservation of wildlife, but he's also a huge aficionado of early photography, and stereoscopy is one of his specialisms. And sure enough, the curators of the Brian May archive actually went through the images and managed to find an image of Stonehenge, a photographic image, which predated everything that we knew existed before that. So we'll be catching up with him and his team of curators, Denis Pellerin and Rebecca Sharp, just after this brief message.
English Heritage cares for our most historic places, including Tintagel Castle, Stonehenge, Hadrian's Wall, and Dover Castle. Become an English Heritage member and enjoy memorable days out from just $4.75 per month. An annual membership gives you unlimited access to hundreds of historic places. Join today. Search English Heritage Membership online. English Heritage, where history never stands still.
Well, Dr. Brian May, Denis Pellerin and Rebecca Sharp, welcome to the Solstice Live Show. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about something that's actually really exciting. So, Brian, perhaps could you kick off by telling us a little about what stereo cards are for people who perhaps don't know, and how you happen to have this particular one?
Well, I'll give you the potted version. Everybody now knows what stereo is really at 3D, because everyone's seen Avatar, which is a beautifully produced film, and you had to wear special glasses to see it in 3D, right? That's what 3D is. And it hasn't changed much since 1832 when Charles Wheatstone discovered the principle. We have our own London stereoscopic company, Stereoscope here, which we call the Owl, and we sell them online, etc., etc. And it's basically a Victorian stereoscope, but we use it for all kinds of side-by-side stereos, including lots of stuff from NASA these days, because you can photograph everything in 3D and everything benefits from having that depth perception. So the Renaissance missed it. Michelangelo didn't discover it, Leonardo da Vinci didn't figure it out, but Charles Wheatstone did in 1832, and we've all benefited because we have two eyes. We have two eyes for a very, very good reason. It gives us this perception of the world around us in depth, and obviously helped in our survival as a species.
Absolutely, and we're using those two eyes distinctly right now to look at these incredible stereograph cards. Can you tell me what first sparked your interest in them? How did you first chance upon them?
Oh, well, for me, it was Weetabix. And when
Of
I was
course.
a kid, I don't think it's the same these days. You don't get stuff with cereals, but in those days, you always got a toy with your cereal packet, and you'd open it up and you get. And the toy that this Weetabix packet gave to me was a little card, only about this big, very small, with two images which looked the same. And the first one I ever had was a hippopotamus, I seem to remember. I think we even have it here. I can show you the very card. And it said on the back, send away 1 6 and a packet top of Weetabix to get the viewer. And this is the viewer that came in the post. And you can see the likeness. So I got my viewer, I put it in there. And suddenly, instead of two little flat pictures, I was seeing through a window and looking into the mouths of these incredible creatures. And it was all in 3D. It was like I was there and I could smell their breath. So I was hooked. I just thought, if this is the way photography can be done in depth, why doesn't everybody do it the whole time? Turns out I just missed the big rush, because the 1950s were very big on stereo in the movies and in magazines, but it had all died down by the time I came across it around 1960 when I was a boy. So it's our mission as the London Stereoscopic Company to bring 3D, proper 3D, into the 21st century. And we've been doing it quite successfully. We publish books, we publish cards, just as the London Stereoscopic Company did in the 1850s. And it was massive. In the 1850s, it was huge. It was like films and TV and the internet all rolled into one. London Stereoscopic Company in Regent Street and a couple of other locations in London boasted 1 million views on their books. People went nuts for this, and they saw the world through their stereoscopes. So we're doing the same.
That's incredible. And can I just ask, is that the original one from Weetabix that you've had since childhood?
Yes. I don't throw anything away. I'm a nightmare to live with, but I don't throw stuff away. And this is precious to me. Yeah, this brought the whole world of stereo to me.
Yeah, well, you say you don't throw things away. And I guess that leads us on nicely to your archive, because not everyone has archives, but you have your own archive of stereoscopy. And Denny and Rebecca, I know, are involved with that. So how does the archive work? Could you outline what it comprises of, how big it is, perhaps?
I'm going to hand over to Denis, who can tell you.
Well, actually,
he's my curator.
Yeah, the archive is, well, it started as a private collection. And when Brian liberated me from my former job as a teacher, I became the curator of that archive. And I started putting things in a sort of different order, because he was a collector. He collected by passion. And then we tried to put things, French photographers, English photographers, and we had to go to through 160,000 images. So it's a big collection.
Okay, and I'm guessing they weren't all. Sorry, I was going to say they're probably not all from Weetabix either. I imagine these are
only some from Weetabix. Yeah. The next part of my story is I went to Imperial College in London, South Kensington, and every day on my way in, I had to pass Christie's auctioneers. And I discovered that you could actually find the originals of these cars from the 1850s and 60s and the 1900s, and you could buy them. Now, I couldn't buy them because I was penniless as a student, but I used to go in there and you could view them, you could touch them, you could put them in a viewer, and I learned everything that I know about stereos from just going through the viewing periods in Christie's. So that was a great thing. When I got to be rich and famous, which was a couple of years later, actually it was many years later, I was able to go there and actually buy some things. But meanwhile, I'd been to car boot sales. It was possible to pick these cards up very cheap when I was starting off. Not so much now. You can get them on the internet, of course. But one of the cards is one of these Stonehenge pictures, which is leading us to the next part of the story, right?
Absolutely. And I must confess at this point as well, I'm a fan. I've got my own, and they are things of absolute beauty. Rebecca, I'd like to talk to you because, as Brian's alluded to there, there's this tantalizing, fascinating image of Stonehenge, which has now only very recently come to the public's attention, which was part of the archive. So how did you come across it? And how did you realize that it could be something very special to do with the site?
So I was scanning the stereo views, and I've been scanning them by photographer's name. And it was just by chance that I came to Brooks quite early on during lockdown. And I'd read the story on the BBC about finding the earliest view of a family at Stonehenge. And I thought, wow, this must be quite early. So I started to research it with Denis, and we looked into the photographer and his family. We actually found that it was from quite early in the 1860s, especially because we think this is his family. It's in the photo, his children. The appearance of them in the photo suggests it's between 1863 and 1865. So it's much earlier than the one that I read about on the BBC, which was from the 1870s. So I started to get quite excited, and I emailed Stonehenge.
And what sort of reaction did you get then? Were people, I mean, you know, with the greatest of respect, to say I'm Brian May's archivist, and I've got a really early picture of Stonehenge, it could come across that people might not believe it. Did it get the reception that you thought?
It got stone silence. There was no one at Stonehenge. It was in lockdown, so I was running around the house, but I had to wait for the excitement to ripple through.
Yeah,
eventually.
And what excitement as well, because I mean, firstly, perhaps it comes from a slightly unlikely, or albeit very comprehensive source from Brian's archive, but also this feels like a real survivor, because it sounds like it's quite a candid family shot. Presumably these weren't maybe meant for mass distribution. Perhaps you can correct me if they were, but it seems to be quite personal.
Yeah, it's unusual in many ways, this card, because I know, I've spent a lot of my life looking at stereo cards, and I'd never heard of this person, Brooks. He wasn't a big commercial stereoscopic photographer as such, but Denis and Rebecca were able to discover that he was actually very eminent in other ways. If you could.
Yeah, he was a photographer, a very early photographer in Salisbury, as early as 1855. And he actually made his own lenses, and his first camera, he made them himself. And so this is, you said it was a candid photo. Actually, it took probably 20 to 30 seconds to make it, to make the two exposures, because it's sequential. So he had to take one per picture, move the camera, take the other one. And his family couldn't move. And people in the background actually have moved because maybe they were not aware of what was going on. So it was not really a snapshot.
Oh, well, poor old Brooks. If his family's anything like mine, he'll only have got one shot at that before everyone just got too bored and wandered off. And what joy that, firstly, it's managed to be discovered in the archive, and now it's going to go on and inform other people. Can you explain, Brian, what is the next step now that we've linked up the stereo card with the site?
Yeah, well, a number of things. What we like to do very often as historians, if you like, and photo historians, is to try and recreate the scene, see if we can go back and find the very spot where the photographer stood or sat or whatever, where he put his tripod and which direction he was looking. And basically, these two geniuses here did a site visit early on and managed to figure it out. And we came back and we all looked at it together, but basically they knew where to go. So by the time we went for our proper photographic trip, we knew where we were going, and we found the spot. We were standing sort of behind this rock, and the rock has sunk a little bit. It's changed because a number of things have changed. This leaning large rock here has been restored to verticality in the meantime, so it doesn't look quite the same. It's a bit of a shame. We were thinking of asking them to make it lean over again, but they didn't seem to want to do that. So a few things have been done to Stonehenge over the years, but we were able to recreate it pretty much exactly, with these very recognizable pieces here. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
At the back, those are still standing just the same. So we're able to line it up. And so we've come up with some very nice recreations, and we're going to make another site visit next week to see if we can also photograph it from the air and document what we're doing. Because Stonehenge is hard to see from beside it. It's very big, and it's very sort of two-dimensional, if you like. You can't see the roundness of the layout of the stone. So we're taking a secret weapon, which is my friend Jamie Cooper's wonderful mast camera. He has a van with a mast on it, and up goes the camera, and it can see from above. Much better than a drone, because the drone can't really stay in one place for very long because it runs out of fuel.
And also, I think what you showed with that photograph, not only are you able to recreate it, but the elements that you can't recreate offer that glimpse of how much it's changed in the intervening 170 years, which is a really exciting historical insight for us, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And Denis and Rebecca have now put together, with the help of some of our technical people here, a lovely film which will be shown in the exhibition, which is alongside Stonehenge, and it will be in stereo. There will be stereo viewers. You'll hear the sound. Sound is a secret, another secret weapon. But these guys have put together a beautiful film of Stonehenge through the ages, and you can see how things have changed. Really fascinating. You can also see what hasn't changed, which is part of the point, isn't it? They wanted the eternal. They were building forever.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're still celebrating it to this day, all these millennia later. And, you know, talking of celebrating it, I've got to mention the T-shirts, which look magnificent.
Proudly worn by their owners. Denis treated us, bless him.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm feeling very jealous right now, but also it's
we're jealous because we don't get to see it. You're there. The summer solstice, something magical is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a meaningful place and time for so many people. Do you have, and this is a question to all of you, do you have a strong connection to the site and to Solstice? Is it something that has often formed part of your thinking, maybe inspired you?
Do you want to go first?
So my grandparents lived in Wiltshire. So I visited Stonehenge a few times, but not actually on Solstice. I just love the site. It doesn't have to be the solstice. I just love being there.
Yeah, it's magical, isn't it? And how about you, Denis?
Yeah, I agree. I visited several times when I was a teacher in France. I used to take school groups to visit Stonehenge. And so I visited, but it was so much better visiting it without a crowd of children around, much better, much quieter. And you can really appreciate, I mean, it's amazing. The silence is amazing. When you can hear only the wind and the skylarks, that's absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, silence isn't something that we will probably be blessed with on the solstice because there's, you know, going to be lots going on. But Brian, for you as well, I mean, obviously in your career as a musician, do things like Stonehenge inspire you? Are you kind of, I mean, Spinal Tap famously wrote a song about Stonehenge, but do you look at those?
There's a lovely piece in the Spinal Tap movie about it where they get the dimensions wrong. This is classic. They make it in inches instead of feet. It's worth seeing, actually. No, but I was, well, when this came up, I went to my from childhood, my photo album. And in 1959, I was there. I was one of this horde of children which descended upon Stonehenge, as we did in those days, and crawled all over the rocks, as you were allowed to do then. And I was able to find a photograph that I took in 1959, and I could match it up with where we were standing exactly, because some of the stones have sunk slightly, but they're still in the same place. And you could see that I took a picture of the joint, the sort of mortise and tenon joint that is there, and I was able to find that spot. And that felt very, it was a moving thing for me to think, you know, I was here as a boy, not really knowing what was going on, but taking my pictures, and I had that picture with me, and I could match it up to the person that I am today, standing on that spot.
And there's such a lovely circularity now with bringing the stereogram card back and doing the same with that shot as well. So I think everything, you know, this is the power of Stonehenge. It draws people in and keeps you coming back. So it's been fantastic to speak to you all about it. I guess my last question is, have you got any plans apart from watching our glorious live stream, of course, for Solstice itself? How will you be celebrating and reflecting?
I'll probably be doing emails, to be honest. That's what I normally do. What about you, Denis?
I'll probably be sorry. It means that the days are going to get shorter again, and it's terrible, a terrible feeling.
I'll probably be taking stereos. That's what I always do.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's been absolutely fantastic to discuss this amazing, fascinating photography and get a bit more of an insight into the different elements that Stonehenge can bring to people. Hope you enjoy the solstice, and well, let us know if you discover any more great cards.
We'll be in touch. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, you should be able to see this in the exhibition very soon.
Absolutely.
Our stereoscopic movie. So cheers. Happy solstice.
Cheers.
Thank you so much to Brian May and his curators, Denis and Rebecca there. What a fantastic interview, and a great little coincidence that someone as world-renowned as one of the world's leading rock guitarists also has such a strong connection to Stonehenge, and we can talk about it on the solstice. I'd also like to say as well, I know that
plenty of you have been trying to watch the sunrise over Stonehenge this morning and haven't been able to. The live stream is now re-established. We do have our dedicated Stonehenge live feed on YouTube and Facebook. You can just watch that. You don't have to watch me talking. You can just switch to those channels and you will get pictures of the stones and nothing else. It's perfect for contemplation and watching and relaxation. I would like to apologise on behalf of myself and the English Heritage team for the difficulties that we've had this morning. It hasn't gone according to plan, as you might have guessed by now. We've been doing our very best to bring you the kind of content that we know that you wanted and that we wanted to as well. I must say we have been disappointed that a number of people have chosen to disregard our request to not travel to the stones this morning, and that is the reason why we haven't been able to bring you the pictures that we would have liked to have done. It is disappointing to see that happen, but unfortunately in those kind of situations we have to put the safety of our staff members first, and that's why we have had some interruption this morning. I hope you understand, I hope you appreciate that these are challenging times for everyone involved. We have been told by the police that people are now being dispersed and the situation is under control. And as I say, there is a live feed now where you can get a shot of the stones on this solstice morning, and I think it's, you know, it's one of those things that was completely out of our control. We desperately didn't want this to happen, but we really have been working hard to bring you some form of content throughout the morning. So hopefully it's at least expanded your knowledge of Stonehenge and Solstice if we haven't always been able to go to the stones live. Like I say, you can do that now throughout the morning as well. We've been asking for your recollections, your thoughts on Stonehenge and the solstice. So for the last time this morning, let's take a little look at what some of you have been saying. We've got Sylvia Powell, who says good morning from Bristol. Hello Sylvia. This is from Anne Curtis. I was there in 1986 with my auntie when she visited from South Africa. I was able to stand next to the stones. I have a photo. Shortly after, I believe they stopped visitors from going right up to the stones all the time. Have a great solstice, everyone. Thank you, Anne. Gina Henderson Rogers said, I had a magical trip to Stonehenge with my daughters in July 2015 and can't wait to be able to return. It's so beautiful and immense. It really is. The scale always takes my breath away, so I'm glad that you felt that as well, Gina. Elaine Sedano says, Brian May is a legend. Morning, Brian. Hopefully Brian's seen that this morning. I don't know if he's an early riser or not, but he certainly is a legend. And what a diverse range of interests he has. Unbelievable. And lastly, Gary James Nutbean has said, I've been to loads of solstices. I've seen a few of the best sunrises ever. I'm gutted lockdown closed it, but we all have next year. And that's absolutely true. So thank you, Gary, for that note of optimism as well. Now, we do have one more thing to mention whilst we're still on air, and that is that Stonehenge is a wonderful place to come and visit, but not just for the stones. If you come to the site, you'll be able to come around here, the visitor centre, where we currently have our Your Stonehenge exhibition, and just near here we have some recreation Neolithic settlements, and we've always got volunteers on hand to explain how they were built, how people lived in them, and the very tools that were used to create them and Stonehenge itself, to give a little bit more colour and what you can expect with a visit to Stonehenge. Here's one of those volunteers now. Now, rumour has it that Richard was here the first time that these implements were used. I'm sorry, Richard.
No, it's okay.
But
I'm used to it.
Yeah. Well, you're best placed to teach us all about these fantastic things.
Okay.
We've got a table full of Neolithic tools and instruments here. So can you talk us through some of the interesting items? Because to me, some of the things I can kind of guess, other things I've got no clue about.
Okay. The first thing to say is that these are not the originals, they're copies.
Right.
Okay. Here, for example, is an axe, and this material is all that we find today because it's flint. And everywhere there is chalk, and I know that my colleagues explain that this is all a chalk landscape, we find layers of flint in it. And it comes out in lumps that look a little bit like this, but can be much bigger. And if you take a hammerstone to them, it's called flint knapping, but here's a hammerstone. You can hit it in the right way and it will flake off into, first of all, big bits and then smaller and smaller. And eventually, of course, you get your axe which is sharp enough to cut down trees. They were relatively friendly people, not using it as a weapon, they used it as a tool. And they also, we have found in the area, greenstone axe heads. Now the only place they found greenstone is in the Lake District and possibly some in Cornwall too. But why they have found them in this area, the originals, we just don't know. But it could be for trade, and it could be because my axe head looks better than yours. Flint, though, is the local material of choice for making tools. So if we take that as an example, there's a knife,
Right.
and there's a scraper. The knife is sharp, it's made of flint, and the scraper is deliberately rounded like that so you don't cut a skin if you're scraping the meat off it.
Right, because the skins were valuable and could be used for other things.
Exactly that. Exactly that. I mean, keeping you warm, particularly.
And so people who are making these objects, and can I just say, by the way, that most people who hear the word napping in the 21st century might think it's a mid-afternoon snooze,
Yeah.
but we're talking about flint working here.
Yes.
So
yes.
would these sort of Neolithic people, would they be a jack of all trades, so you would nap the flint and then make it into an axe and then use that axe, or would you have people whose job it was in their society to do those? Do we know that much?
I don't think we know that, but one of the suggestions I've heard in the last few years as a result of some of the finds over in an excavation near here is that children may have been making the arrowheads each evening instead of looking at screens and doing their homework.
For that, is there?
No, but they might have been. They don't know for sure. But here are a couple of arrowheads, for example, and you see here the evolution of an arrowhead. If you go here, this is the sort of traditional arrowhead shape. It's called a leaf-shaped arrowhead. But they found that when they were using these, they fell out of the side of the animal too easily. If they put a bar like this, you found that, or they found that they would hang in there in all probability, keep the wound open, and they could then track it for greater distance across the countryside. Right. Before it lay down and gave up the unequal struggle, one hopes.
I can hear the noise of children who potentially want to nap some arrowheads in the background.
Yeah,
It's an opportune moment to be talking about them. But it's quite fine work, isn't it, as well? When
Oh,
we
yes.
think about Stonehenge and the huge
Yeah.
structure
Yeah.
that it consists of,
Yeah.
you might be forgiven for thinking that it was quite brutish labour that was involved. But here, it's very fine, very delicate,
yes.
very specialist work.
Thank you for the cue, because this is what they would have finished off their fine work with. The tip of this, recognize it?
Well, it looks like a deer antler to me.
It is. It's an deer antler. It's a great tool and commonly found even today in areas that are not cultivated. It's a digging tool, really, because you are able to hit the top of this with a stone like this, nice rounded hammer stone, and drive it right in the neck. And the holes that the big sarsen stones stand in and the little blue stones were all dug with antler picks like this. And when they'd finished digging, they left them in the bottom of the holes, which of course the archaeologists are very grateful for, because they can radiocarbon date these, so they know how old it was when they dug the hole.
Absolutely. And what strikes me most is the application of an antler in order to quarry and excavate stone. You just wouldn't think that it could be that useful and hardy.
Well, it is very hard, this, and I didn't quite finish it, but the tip of this, if you put something you want to put an edge over your knee with a bit of leather, you can just gently chip it away to put your edge on it with the tip of your antler.
And that is super. I know that you're holding what looks to be a very long arrow there as well, Richard, and some people will be looking at that and thinking, well, is it that substantial? So do we have evidence to show?
Yes, we do. Here
we
is the bow that they found, or a copy of the bow that they found in the marsh or the levels in Somerset, in bog, and it beautifully preserved. It was found in 1963, and obviously it's called the marsh bow because it was found in marsh. And it was broken in half, and the two halves are laid side by side, wrapped up in a little piece of material. So it was almost a ceremonial burial. But if you put them together, you get a bow this big, and you therefore need an arrow this big to use it, because to get the power from the length of it, you've got to have an arrow this big. It is used, the arrow is made of local material. This is a hazel shaft, and these, they don't look, are goose feathers. Here are better examples of goose feathers, but the reason that is hazel, fast-growing, straight-grained shrub or tree, whatever you. The geese are found on the River Avon, which is just beyond the monument, and they are still found today on the River Avon. So the point is that they're using local materials, as you will have heard from the chalk daub and things like that. Nothing was brought very far except for the bluestones, which you will hear about.
Well, yeah, if you're going to bring anything, bring the heaviest thing that you can find, I suppose.
Sure.
And just a final point. Look at the table, you see the variety of stuff that was being created, all these different objects for different purposes. But another thing that becomes very apparent is everything had a use, didn't it?
Yes.
And so we've got wood used for different purposes. We've got one tool that's used to create another tool, and we've got different parts of animal and naturally occurring produce is coming together to help make their lives easier.
I don't know that their lives would have been easy, but it was pretty hard to survive.
To what it would have been previously, but
true enough.
Not
True enough. True enough. And the other thing, I don't know. Did I show you the Neolithic glue?
No, but please do, because it's a fascinating thing. Isn't it? Very dark black.
Yeah, and it's a mixture of charcoal ash, pine resin, and beeswax, and they still find traces of it on the art dig up today. But if you mix it up, those three ingredients together, and warm it up, not very much, about it'll run like treacle, and then you can use it to stick things together, and it lasts 5,000 years.
Well, I mean, that's incredible. Thank you so much for talking through some of these objects with us, Richard, and you've filled 5,000 years into about 10 minutes, which is quite a feat.
You guided me.
Thank you, Richard, and what a fantastic introduction to Neolithic tools that was. Richard is, of course, a volunteer here at Stonehenge, and if you'd like to follow in his footsteps and volunteer here or at any of the 400 plus English heritage sites, then all you have to do is head to the English Heritage website to find out more details. Well, I'm afraid that is about all that we've got time for today on the summer solstice, the longest day in the Northern Hemisphere. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, I just want to reiterate as well, our apologies for not being able to bring you all the footage that we had hoped to do. Of course, if you're wondering still, if you didn't quite catch what I was saying before, we had some issues with people coming onto site despite our request for them not to, which was very unfortunate because it meant that we weren't able to bring you the pictures of sunrise that we'd so wished that you could have seen. It's one of those things, it was out of our control. The police have now got things back under control. But obviously it doesn't really help us. We weren't able to do what we wanted to do. So thank you for bearing with us. And thank you to everyone who stuck with us as well, who got involved, who gave us comments, who was really happy to engage with what we were able to bring you. It's been really helpful for us. It's kept us going and our spirits up, because it's been difficult here as well in the studio, not quite knowing what was going on. So thank you so much for that. We look forward to hopefully having things a bit more back to what we'd normally expect at Solstice next year. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we can welcome lots of you back onto site properly next year and enjoy it as we would all like to. For now though, it is goodbye from myself. It's goodbye from the team here at English Heritage. Thank you again to all of you for watching. I'm going to leave you now with a quick break and then a final view of the sky slowly lightening over the stones. We can fortunately bring you that now. So from me and from everyone here, thank you, goodbye, and a happy solstice.
English Heritage cares for our most historic places, including Tintagel Castle, Stonehenge, Stonehenge, Hadrian's Wall, and Dover Castle. Become an English Heritage member and enjoy memorable days out. 75. An annual membership gives you unlimited access to hundreds of historic places. Join English Heritage, where history never stands still.